J-Dog, what happened? Where's that sunshine of yesterday? It was beautiful out yesterday. It was actually gorgeous out, and now we get back to a little bit of the dreary stuff. What are you doing? I thought you were gonna give us a couple days of sunshine here. All right. Did you see, by the way, on Saturday, gonna be up near 70 for a high? Oh, WrestleMania. It's Easter weekend, J-Dog. All right. Hey, listen, we got a packed show for you. Let's do with the basics first. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards, and we're in our Capitol studios and all the way up into Portland, Maine. WTSN AM and FM. We got the Lakes region covered for you. WEMJ AM and FM. Our relatively new 98.3 FM HD2 if you like that digital stuff. 107.7 FM. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Thousands of you streaming each morning. Got a great app, simply at the Pulse of an H. Our poll question on X at the Pulse of an H actually has to do with broadcasting. The White House is asking Congress to cut funding to NPR and PBS. Do you think that's a good thing? We're just asking you straight up. I'll leave it there. Straight up. Do you think that's a good thing? Our poll question, White House is asking Congress to cut the public taxpayer, the funding for NPR, PBS. We'll see where that goes. All right. J-Dog, we have a packed show for you. A lot to talk about this morning on this. Well, again, I do see some blue out there, so let's go with the optimism. Some blue skies with some clouds today for our Tuesday. His name is Frank Edelblue. He's a commissioner of education in the Granite State. He has been, and it's hard to believe, 8 years he's been the commissioner of public education in the Granite State. He's in our studios as a newsmaker out of the 8. Commissioner, thanks for being here.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And it is hard to believe 8 years serving as the education commissioner for the state of New Hampshire.
It's been a bit since you've been on the show, and there's been a lot over the years. Can you believe it's been 8 years?
It's hard to imagine. The time just flies, but I have to tell you, it has been a great experience and a rewarding experience serving the people, the children, the family, and the educators of New Hampshire.
But you look at the seesaw it's been, I imagine, for you. You went through all the stuff. I don't even like to say the C word, but all the stuff of remote learning and having to get through a lot of stuff, opening up choices for parents. We're going to talk about that. But people may forget, Frank Edelblue, before you became commissioner of education, you ran in a primary with someone named former Governor Chris Sununu, who was in that seat a week ago this morning at this very same moment, by the way, when he told us he's not running for the U.S. Senate first here. But you almost won that primary against Governor Sununu, I think was it not even 1,000 votes or less? What was it?
Around 1,000 votes.
That is a squeaker. And people forget. And then he went on to become a 4-term governor and named you to be the commissioner of education, not once, but twice. Overall, have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a very rewarding experience. Very engaging and fun to be spending time, with our children across the state, with our families, with our educators. Really, that is the future of the state. And so when I came into this role, I had as my goal and my objective to really think forward for the state and try and think, where are we going to go, and try and create educational programming that really meets the needs of all students. And so that's what I've been laser focused on. Sometimes I take some criticism on different things, but it's easy to take the criticism because really anything that I do, my motivation, my focus is really about children and the success of children.
One of our news contributors yesterday, one on the media side, said you've actually gotten a lot more accomplished than people may realize over those 8 years for public education, innovation. Education, as we know federally under the Trump administration, it's being looked at totally differently with the Department of Education, more to the states. Here in New Hampshire, the contentious stuff, it seems to me, that's sort of risen to the legislature is with the NEA or some of the Democrats versus Republicans. Unfortunately, it's become politicized. So I'm a big fan of charter schools. I've met more families who have benefited from our great charter school system. I don't think a lot of people understand that's part of our public educational system. They think charter schools is this aberration. Okay.
You're correct. Charter schools are public charter schools in the state of New Hampshire.
And we got a whole bunch of them, right? Okay. I think that's amazing because I met kids directly and personally that for whatever reason, they got to a charter school sophomore, junior year, and they thrived. Okay. And the teachers working there, I hear, love it. Okay. So these freedom educational vouchers or accounts. This is what I hear, Commissioner. This is just giving rich people money they don't need to take money away from public education. How do you answer that?
Yeah, so what it really is about is making sure that every child in the state of New Hampshire has an opportunity to be successful in their educational trajectory. Education should not be dictated by a person's zip code. And so this program really allows students, irrespective of where they are in New Hampshire, along with much of the other programming that we have, to be able to choose an educational pathway that is beneficial for them. And it saves taxpayers money.
Now, one of the big things that's making news just about everywhere, and it gets to be, in my opinion, sometimes so obvious to me. I don't know why, for example, the state of Maine and Governor Mills, why some people there academically keep pushing it's okay for a boy to play in girls' sports or a male to play in women's sports. I've really held off this subject for years on my show because to me, I scratched my head when I was watching the Olympics, for example, and I'm seeing basically a biological male beating up the Italian female boxing champion in the Olympics. The recent fencing incident where the fencing, the athlete stood down. And the state of Maine keeps pushing back on the Trump administration, even at the risk of losing federal funds. Where are we at on a couple questions in New Hampshire? Title IX, which is typically what I would say protecting women's sports against, for example, a boy or a male playing. And I know New Hampshire has a law, I think, that is under sort of on its own. But then there's this Title VI subject. Where are we compliant? Where are we at on this subject? Because it's a big one.
It's a really two different subjects. So the Title IX is really around the, as you framed it, the sex discrimination, particularly with regard to sports. And Title IX was initially put in place as part, or at least in part, to create, these sport opportunities for women. And so to kind of have come, full circle and say like, okay, we're no longer going to protect women under Title IX just seems silly, right? Because that was the entire purpose of that. So
and women worked very hard for that for a long time,
And we've got some incredible female athletes in this state of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And so, so at a federal level, we're protecting them, but then as well, the legislature,
including the world's best skier, by the way. Keep going.
Okay. But then so federally, but then at the state level as well, the state legislature passed a law as well to protect, women in sports. Now that is currently in litigation. So there were some organizations that sued, myself and the New Hampshire Department of Education around that law because we were working towards the enforcement of that law. And so we'll see how that plays out in the courts. But given the current environment, it seems like a kind of a very logical thing that it's okay to allow biological women to have sporting opportunities and to preserve those opportunities for them, for their growth and for their development, and to help them and let them succeed.
Yeah, I don't get it. Even in Massachusetts, Democrat Congressman Seth Moulton said on voting day, he has young girls. He's on the Marblehead, Salem, Swampscott area where I grew up. And he just doesn't think it's right for a boy to be out there mowing them down on the soccer lacrosse field. He got pounced on in the state of Massachusetts from the Governor Huey's office. The Democrats like, how can you say this? Let me go back. What's title?
So we may get pounced on for that comment that
I to me, it just seems right. I don't get it. But real quickly, what's this Title VI stuff?
So Title VI is basically just recently the federal U.S. Department of Education requires the local education agencies, so our school districts and the state of New Hampshire, to certify that they are in compliance with Title VI, which is really the anti-discrimination laws. And the way they frame that is that you shouldn't have any illegal DEI types of activities going on. And illegal would imply that they violate the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is Title VI. And so we are asking our districts to report back to us and let us know whether they are in compliance with Title VI and that there are not discriminatory practices in their school systems. I'm hopeful that all of our districts can do that. I'm a little bit perplexed because some educators have expressed concern. They say, well, it's not clear, what is a violation of Title VI. And that would be, quite frankly, that's a little bit sad. It's a little disturbing that, since 1964, we've had these statutes on the books, anti-discrimination. I would hope that all of our school leaders are very clear about what's discriminatory and what's not discriminatory.
Do we currently, because one thing all these subjects have created is a bonanza for lawyers in terms of cases. Do we have any lawsuits, for example, against the state over New Hampshire's law, no boys and girls sports, no men and women's sports? Is there anyone pushing back? Are there any districts or anyone still pushing back like the state of Maine? Do we have any pending lawsuits, for example, on this subject?
Yes, so we have the pending lawsuit on the sport, but we also have a pending lawsuit, excuse me, on the state law to prevent discrimination as well. And so those are in the court system right now. I know that our anti-discrimination lawsuit had a hearing last week in the district court, the first district court down in Massachusetts. Given the nature of that court, not sure how that's going to play out, but these types of matters are working their way to the Supreme Court. Which is really probably where they'll ultimately be decided.
Well, hey, before I let you go, I guess the news talk of the day, spent a lot of my show yesterday on this with analysts, is who's running for what office now in the midterms, because it's wide open now that Gene Shaheen's not running for the U.S. Senate. We know Chris Pappas is in. He's been on the show quite a few times since that. Whether or not Maggie Goodlander challenges him, we'll wait and see. On the Republican side, it was the first district. Congressional, first district congressional. That was WM Muir had that yesterday. We'll have her on tomorrow. But real quickly, on your side, in terms of, I said earlier, you nearly won that gubernatorial primary when you first ran for statewide office as governor. You almost beat a household name in Chris Sununu, the Sununu name. He barely beat you. People forget that. So now it was Chris Sununu was sitting in that seat where you are a week ago today when he said the words, Jack, I'm not running for the U.S. Senate, first here before anywhere else. And my question is, Scott Brown, who's been a regular on my show, was saying didn't matter who ran, Chris Sununu, Gene Shaheen, he was going to run. Sort of backed off a little bit since the Sununu announcement, because Sununu had recently visited President Trump and gotten his endorsement, which, if given their background's interesting. Trump saying, I like the guy, he can win. I hope he runs. He can win that race. Senate next year, the midterms is one of the biggest open Senate races in the country. Biggest political race in New Hampshire's history is this U.S. Senate. So my question is, you match up to a lot of the Trump stuff on education. They want innovation. They want to get the states to do more. You've done a lot in 8 years as commissioner. You're nearly won your statewide race for governor. Are you considering a run for the U.S. Senate? Are people calling and talking to you about this? Because right now there's a lack of big names, and you're one of the very few in the state on the Republican bench. Are you getting calls? Are people talking to you about running for the U.S. Senate?
So certainly people are talking to me, but right now, really my focus is on finishing out my work as the Commissioner of Education. My term will run through July, like June 30th.
Perfect time to jump into a race.
Yes, but at this time, I'm not really thinking about that. I've actually kind of put that in the back of my mind, and I'm just focused on trying to end well the work that I'm doing here. What I can tell you is that no matter what happens, I'm not leaving the state. I'm going to continue to serve my state because I love New Hampshire. I think it's the best state in the country, and I think we got the best population of folks in the country. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to serve them in any capacity.
But is a statewide office in your future plans to run again? Is this something you're considering?
Yeah. So again, it's not something I'm ruling out, but at this point in time, just focused like a laser on trying to finish out as Commissioner of Education.
So in terms of even the U.S. Senate, you'll wait and see this summer.
I'll wait and see what my future might look like. Exactly.
All right. In terms of when you reflect back on your 8 years before I let you go, what stands out? I brought up the remote learning stuff. I was fuming on my show because I was talking to teachers, especially on the special education front, saying these kids are just keeping them at home this long. It's developmentally hurting them. It's going to set them back. The anxiety for families, daycare, all that. I'm like, why are these kids not back in school in New Hampshire? And when I pressed you with the governor's office, they said it was up to the local superintendent. So why did New Hampshire, I just got to ask you as a pet peeve of my commissioner, why did New Hampshire keep remote learning for public schools so long when they could have safely gone back to school with that whole virus thing?
Right, well, as you know, Jack, so we basically, under Governor Sununu, we basically started it from that first period of time in 2020. We then put a task force together, and I hate really going back looking at COVID. I don't even know why.
I agree with you.
Anymore.
I agree with you. Only because of the damage done to young kids.
So we provided guidance for schools to be able to open safely in September 21. Some did, some didn't, because we're a local control state. That's how that played out. But what I can tell you is over the last 8 years, we have put in place a number of educational options. You mentioned charter schools. We've got open enrollment schools. We've got Learn Everywhere types of programs. We've got education freedom accounts. We've got all of these policies in place to allow students to choose an educational pathway that's really going to allow them to succeed in their future.
And the only reason I bring it up, because I'm just like you, Commissioner. I don't even like talking about it. I don't even like thinking about it. But when I talk to college officials, the anxiety and the stress levels of young kids who were teenagers then, now in college, the infirmaries, the number one. I just had the UNH police in here talking about a comfort dog program that's starting. When I went to college, maybe when you did, you went to the infirmary if you had mononucleosis, strep throat, or the flu, or you cut your head open on the stairway, you know? Today, it's emotional. Almost all the calls public safety officials are responding to in colleges here in New Hampshire, nationally, a lot of it are just emotional. A lot of it is tied to that. All right, so Commissioner, I already have a few people listening. Frank Edible, thank you for reflecting back on your time as Commissioner of Education. Thank you for coming into our studios, and who knows, a statewide run for office may be in your future.
We'll see what happens. But thanks for having me on, Jack.
Thank you. All right, have a good Tuesday. We come back. We're going to check in with some of the other news talk of the day also a little bit later on. She's running in the 2nd Congressional District, a Republican. She ran last time. We'll catch up with her. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an Age. Back in a moment.
How about you?
U.S. Senate when he's done with his term in July. All right. A lot going on. A lot going on for a, but that's true every day now, right? Wow. Tuesday as we get going. J-Dog on the boards. So there's going to be a period, I would imagine, probably is going to last 30 to 45 days, where you're going to hear musical chairs on the political side of things of who's running for what office. Now that Jeanne Shaheen and Chris Sununu are not running for the U.S. Senate, and the midterms are already started here. That U.S. Senate race has already started. Chris Pappas on the Democrat side firmly out and established really as the top Democrat choice of the behind the scenes, in front of the scenes Democrats running. Now, no doubt, I think Pappas will get some challengers for that primary. And it may be from someone who's further left, politically speaking, with the energy in the Democrat Party is here locally and nationally. And whether or not Maggie Goodlander, the second congressional district member of Congress who's new to the scene in terms of running for Congress here, from New Hampshire originally, but, grew up perhaps not here as much, but her family, Betty Tamposi, well-known national family. Maggie Goodlander, kind of the new all-star in the Democrat bench. Sources telling us she's getting heavily courted by some of the insiders, particularly out-of-state big Democrat donors, to run for this U.S. Senate as a Democrat, which means she would challenge Chris Pappas. Now, the chances are probably better than good that she will not do that after only being in the second district for a few months and just winning that seat. And, Democrats would like to keep her there and have Pappas running for the Senate, but that opens up the first congressional district. And not a surprise, really, Stephanie Shaheen. There was some feeling on the Seacoast that she might even run for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat, the seat that Pappas is running for, the seat that her mother held for a number of years, of course, Jeanne Shaheen. But she's looking at that first congressional district. So is Mara Sullivan. The Republican side of that first district is kind of quieter. It's more quiet. And who might run? Not really hearing a bunch of big names yet. Second congressional district, we'll come back to that with a guest coming up in a little bit. But the U.S. Senate side, Scott Brown, since Chris Sununu a week ago today on this show first, before any other media saying he's not running for the U.S. Senate. In fact, some media were even waiting for Sununu to get outside of my studio in our parking lot to get an interview with him, saying the same thing about an hour later. But Sununu not running, so he's moving on. No mention that his brother, John E. Sununu, who had been in Congress and a U.S. Senator, is looking at that. So Scott Brown is really the only Republican circles name that is known who seems to be seriously looking at this, but he has sort of gone a little bit more quiet in terms of interviews, stoking the fires that he's running for the U.S. Senate. It may be that the Trump camp is not weighed in yet after Sununu, because after Chris Sununu met with him, and then he was on my show a week ago today, Trump saying he liked him, wanted him to run, thought he'd win, and had his full support. Sununu had Trump's full support. Well, now anyone running in the primary would presumably need Trump's full support in the Republican U.S. Senate primary. No doubt it will come, but is it going to go to Scott Brown, who was an ambassador in the Trump administration? Or is the reason Scott Brown is not out there more openly saying he's running is because Donald Trump is sort of weighing and waiting to see? Frank Edelblut is someone who a lot of the Trump folks really like in terms of what he's done as head of public education in New Hampshire, opening up more innovation and choices for families in education, kind of mimicking what's happening with the Trump administration and the federal Department of Education, much to the chagrin of like the NEA and teachers unions. But the point is, Edelblut is a serious name. He just said on the show he is getting calls to run for the U.S. Senate, and other sources say he may wait and run for governor down the road after Kelly Ayotte's time. But these opportunities, for example, the U.S. Senate, no doubt maybe why Maggie Goodlander is keeping an eye open to this. These open opportunities with no incumbent to run for the U.S. Senate are very rare. It's every 6 years, and that's a chunk of your life. So Frank Edelblut telling us just moments ago he's getting calls and he'll wait till the end of his term as Commissioner of Education, which will be, I believe he said end of June, July period this summer before making a decision, but not ruling it out, a run for the Senate. So we'll see. And there could well be other names that will pop in, but we'll have much more on all of the above. A couple of the other stories, speaking of education, I don't know if you caught this one. I thought this was interesting. Harvard University pushing the envelope and sort of fighting back against the Trump administration on how they handle anti-Semitic stuff. I don't know if you saw what just happened at Princeton University, where a former prime minister of Israel couldn't even have a civil, respectful appearance and speak on campus without people basically disrupting and you know slurs to Jewish students and all this anti-Semitic behavior at Princeton. But the Trump administration is slashing 2.2 billion in funding to Harvard after the school is defying the Trump administration demands to deal with and address anti-Semitism. So the Harvard president doesn't like the way the Trump administration is telling them. A lot of people had a good response. Harvard has enough money. What do they need our taxpayer dollars for? What does Harvard need our taxpayer dollars for? So we'll see where all that goes. We'll have more on all the above, and we'll come back with another newsmaker. Hey Google, hey Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Talk about the second congressional district next. Happy birthday, Nick. All right, our own White House correspondent John Decker joining us live this morning on the show. John, good morning. We haven't heard a lot of talk kind of since the dust up at the Oval Office with President Zelensky, the Ukraine, and the Trump team, and then the effort to really get some peace talks going with Vladimir Putin and Russia to end the war in Ukraine. And I don't know if Russia and Putin are pushing back, but where's this at, John, in your mind? No, and I wonder if we're going to see kind of like a summit where you'd actually see in a place. Ironically, it probably would not be Greenland, but you know what I'm saying. Could be Iceland, some neutral place where Putin and Trump meet for a couple days to see if they can hammer this out. Because the war will end when Russia, no offense to Ukraine, wants it to end. Real quickly, John, what about the deportation stuff? We're seeing mixed messages on some of the court stuff on deportations as the Trump administration continues to push. That's correct. Of course, yeah, and the leader of El Salvador. Thank you, John Decker, our own White House correspondent. All right, we have another newsmaker. Speaking of the musical chairs in the midterms, which are already underway in the U.S. Senate, now presumably first congressional district, the seat that Chris Pappas is not running for. What about the second district? More talk has been given to the first, but Maggie Goodlander, the recently elected Democrat, sort of the many call the all-star of the Democrats now, uh, winning that election. Lily Tang Williams, the Republican, who's run not once, but more than once for that second congressional district. Sounds like Lily joining us. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H. Are you running again? Are you running again? You're running again? Okay, why do you want you have a great story, fleeing China. China's never been more in the news right now with the tariff war, trade wars going on. What do you think you can do this time that would allow you to prevail more? And because you don't know where the momentum's going to be, particularly with independent voters in New Hampshire in the midterm. So what's the what's the charm that's going to make the third time better for you? Oh yeah. Right. Let me let me ask you this. You touch upon some of the points I was going to ask you, but you do have, I don't have it in front of me, you have a very big social media following. I was going to ask you, how do you translate that into more votes, especially with independent voters in the second congressional district, which recently on the federal side is skewed more Democrat than Republican in the second district. In other words, it's hard for more difficult for a Republican. And some would say the midterms might be more blue than red. So how do you translate some of your following into more votes, especially among independent voters? Let me right. Let me ask you this, Louis Tang Williams, second congressional district Republican candidate on Good Morning Hampshire, the Pulse of an Age. President Trump is sticking to his guns on China with the tariffs, and now we're in an actual trade war with Beijing. Do you support President Trump and what he's doing on raising the tariffs on China? Does he says even the trading, the imbalance that we have with China? Do you support the president's positions on tariffs, particularly with China? Yeah, and no, but yeah, but your point is a good one. The Chinese economy is not as brisk and growing like people thought. It's actually very anemic right now. Lily Tang Williams will get you back again soon, running as a Republican again. As she says, third time could be a charm, second congressional district. Lily, thanks for being on the show. All right. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. J Dog on the boards. A lot happening already. We'll sum it all up right after this. So this next thought goes out to people in Congress, people running for Congress, right here from New Hampshire and elsewhere, and also to those people who feel that the Department of Government Efficiency, what President Trump, Elon Musk, and his team are trying to do, is not good. You know how much waste we really truly do have in the federal government? Do you know people have gone so bonkers they can't even admit that the federal government is bloated and full of waste and wasteful stuff that we don't need, like a bridge to nowhere, billions and billions and billions of taxpayer dollars. We have about a $36 trillion debt. Do you know there's some people who can't even agree that that's necessary to prune the tree of federal government because they're so full of their own self-political importance and thoughts that if something is outside the lane of what they feel, want, and see and breathe, they just go berserk. They won't tell you how much federal waste Bill Clinton, the Democrat president, trimmed, including almost 400,000 federal workers to balance the budget last time it was done. They won't tell you that. But to members of Congress, so here's one that makes no sense to me. So the Musk team recently found within the VA, and I think the VA has done a lot better locally here under recent leadership, and they'll be on my show tomorrow morning in their regular slot, 9:45, 9:50. But nationally, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'll pull it up in a minute because I want to tell you the main point of my point here. You look at the waste within the VA of some of the stuff they've been spending money on, like this survey. They hired some outside firm to do a survey. I'll tell you what they paid for it in a moment. And there was no website to go to or results from the survey, just waste. So waste is everywhere in the federal government. But did you know this? And if it wasn't for Tom Raffio, one of our great contributors and partners and sponsors, and I do a lot with and for Tom in and outside of the show, I think the world of him. President and CEO of Northeast Delta Dental. They're also sponsors of my 11th annual Make 12 Hours Count for Veterans Count. 12 hours we go on May 7th for Veterans Count, part of Easter Seals. But Tom heard me talking about this once, and I'm going to repeat it. Do you know that in this day and age, what is today? Tax day, April 15th, 2025. The VA does not cover all oral health procedures for veterans. Did you know that? So you're a veteran. The VA is supposed to take care of your health care when you get out. You have an impacted tooth. You need a surgical oral health procedure, and the VA doesn't cover it. Why the hell is that? The reason they say is, well, limited resources and eligibility requirements. Do you know the only coverage they do is if you've been a prisoner of war? Why the heck's that in there? I have no idea. How many veterans have actually been a prisoner of war? I mean, what a bunch of BS that is. And the other one is you got to be completely disabled or 100% you need to show that you fell off the truck in Iraq, for example, or a base in North Carolina and broke your teeth or something from a service disability or an accident. But the VA does not cover most all oral health procedures for veterans. Do you know you can die from a impacted tooth infection if it's not treated with an antibiotic and surgery? Do you know you can die? Why doesn't the VA cover oral health? If it wasn't for Tom Raffio and his team, Dr. Mitch and his team of veteran-owned dental practices, after I talked about this on my show years ago, there would be no oral health coverage. These surgeries wouldn't be done for veterans. You know, the last few years, and no one talks about this, and it's okay. We'll talk more about it on May 7th. You know, the last several years, Tom and his board at Northeast Delta Dental have underwritten countless oral health surgery for New Hampshire veterans. Literally, those who listen to my show are a spouse or a member, or a kid or a family member of a veteran who's suffering from an oral health situation where they need some surgery, like thousands of dollars of work, and they don't have the coverage and the VA won't cover it. They've simply called Tom and his team, and within a day or two, they've been in for surgery. I had a veteran a week or two ago told me the same thing happened. Unbelievable. Within a day or two, they were relieved and better and on their way. I don't know how many millions they've underwritten, but they've done it because Congress, it's a congressional glitch, won't fix this lack of oral health care coverage for veterans. Why won't Congress fix this? Why don't veterans get oral health care coverage? What, above the head? They do a crappy job on mental health treatments and therapies. federally. They don't cover the therapies like canines and horse equine therapies that can deal with PTSD and cut down on veteran suicide. But why don't they cover oral health procedures and surgeries? The VA makes no sense to me. It's like, is above your neck not part of your body? And Congress can fix it, and they haven't. Why is that? We have two pretty influential U.S. senators. Senator Shaheen's in there for another year and a half. Senator Hassan. Why? Chris Pappas is on the Veteran Affairs. He's running for Senate. Why doesn't one of our New Hampshire office holders federally put a real motion in play to solve this once and for all? There's enough money. There's plenty of money within the VA. They're cutting waste. There's plenty of money in the federal government. Don't give me that crap. And don't tell me the veteran has to be a POW, prisoner of war, to get coverage. This is absolute BS. And it's the reality this morning. In April of 2025, the veterans, less than 1% serve 340 million very entitled Americans, and veterans are supposed to get coverage and care for their service and signing up. We're supposed to have their back when it comes to taking care of them physically and emotionally, and we don't cover oral health surgeries. Number one cause of bankruptcy for families are healthcare costs. It's a racket in the private sector. You go and get a MRI or your rotator cuff shoulder surgery fixed, and you don't even know how much it costs you. You get bills for a year from the anesthesiologist or the emergency room. You don't even know what you're paying. Veterans should have their oral health care coverage. In fact, if I was running the show, I think the veterans should have like a Visa credit card, be able to go anywhere they want, privately or publicly, for health care, no questions asked, and we cover it. Less than 1% serve. Why the hell is that? And why don't people do something about it in Congress? Why don't people stand up and say, this stops today? You know, a couple of years ago on my show, we really pushed to have like senators up here, and we had like almost a hearing at St. Anselm College Institute of Politics on why the choice program for veterans, to be able to go outside a VA facility, to go to any private, any hospital, if they needed an endoscopy, simple procedure, it should be covered under the VA. Just go to a private or a hospital. If it's not a VA facility, it should be covered. That choice program went away in a New York second because the federal government likes control, the budget. I think veterans should be given a credit card. You want to go to the VA? Great cares there, good people. The VA locally has hired some great new doctors, the medical staff. I've had my show. We'll have them more. I think the VA locally is doing a super job, but they are not a full-time hospital. Veterans have been getting the short end of the stick on healthcare. It sucks, and it should stop today. Some commentary. Good morning, New Hampshire. The Pulse of an Age. Back in a moment.